During the 19th century, in order to ignore its election rules, the government of France invaded Algeria, which was a mostly autonomous part of the Ottoman Empire, with the excuse of a diplomatic incident in which the ruler of Algeria assaulted the French ambassador with a flying whisk. France mobilized into Algeria. The Ottoman Empire, removed from the peak of its powers, could not do much to contain the colonial power. However, resistance by the Algerian native peoples was steep. By 1948, France had control of most of northern Algeria. In 1948, the French Constitution declared that Algeria was French territory, which highlighted Algeria's importance to France. After French annexation of Algeria, French, Spanish, and Italian immigrants moved to Algeria. French administration of the colony was essentially racist. The official called the indigena wrote racism into law by allowing French immigrants to confiscate native land. Banks allowed the French to borrow at 2% interest, whereas Muslims had to pay 30% interest. French rule led to a great change in the traditional Algerian lifestyle. The seizure of the best Algerian arable land led to the deterioration of the average Muslim Algerian family's quality of life, whereas the French built great plantations in western Algeria, exporting the produce for profit. The small cultivated subsistence family-run farms had to produce enough food to nourish 55% of the Algerian population. Therefore, the Algerian agricultural system tipped dangerously close to a famine in 905, 908, and 1912. France also enforced its assimilation policy in Algeria. The policy's goal was to completely eradicate of an Arab Algeria, but install a notion of French Algeria. The first nationalistic tendencies in Algeria were first realized by Algerians who served the French during World War II. During this time, they were exposed to Western ideas of democracy and saw the better quality of life in France. They also questioned the double standard that the French imposed upon them. On one hand, the French championed democracy and equality in their home state, but the French colons refused to recognize the equality of the Algerian Muslim population. There were many strains of nationalistic ideology in Africa. Some were religious Islamic scholars who advocated an Arab and Muslim identity in lieu of their French identity that the colonizers were trying to promote. Abdelhamid Ben Badis formed an association of Muslim teachers with "Algeria is my country, Arabic is my language, and Islam is my religion" as a rallying cry. Some others had a strong populist bent and advocated nothing less than independence, represented by Mesli Hadi of the Northern African Star. However, many nationalists were educated Algerians who were more secular, resenting the fact that they were treated differently from European colons. They were not necessarily seeking socio-economic change, but recognized importance within their own country, as represented by college-educated Farhad Abbas. Confronted with mounting pressure, France, governed by the leftist Popular Front at the time, attempted to defuse the situation by proposing to give equal treatment to a select group of elite Algerians in a conference in Paris. Farhad Abbas, representing a group that would benefit the most with this proposal, strongly agreed, whereas Mesli Hadi rejected the proposal, saying that it would essentially divide Algerians by implicating that some are better than others. However, these proposals failed because of tough opposition from the European colonies.
Disheartened with the continuous blockades by the Europeans, Farhad Abbas demanded autonomy for Algeria. He wrote the Manifesto of the Algerian People, detailing civil liberties for Muslims and demanding releases of political prisoners unfairly detained. It designated Arabic as the official language and listed the past abuses of the colonial government in the spirit of the American Declaration of Independence. It was also around this time that the National Liberation Front was formed along with the National Liberation Army to fight for independence from France. The FLN was a coalition of many armed groups with the addition of Farhat Abbas and the members of Algerian intelligentsia.
Activities of resistance continued to boil until November 1, 1954, when FLN guerrillas opened attacks throughout Algeria, immediately drawing a belligerent French response. The FLN sometimes used terror and coercion to enlist the Algerian people's support. It engaged in indiscriminate bombed attacks against European colons, which led to the European colons' urge of the French government to conduct reprisal against the Muslim population. French intelligence agencies formed a Red Hand, a covert organization that assassinated top FLN leaders. Continuous violence and counter-violence, including serious human rights abuses, became commonplace between the FLN and the French army. The situation became an all-out war in 1956.
All the French paratroopers gained the upper hand in the early beginnings of the battle, arresting many leaders of the rebel movement. The resilience of the FLN seemed to stem from the fact that it had an extensive support system. French sympathizers of the Algerian nationalist movement, whether for moral, political, or economic reasons, Algerians living in France and Egypt supported the FLN. While it also carried out systematic abuses of human rights, the FLN managed to unite the Algerian Muslim population by publicizing the cruel methods by the French army to repress rebellion. It engaged in guerrilla warfare against the French, tactics highly effective against the colonial power as shown in the successful Vietnamese resistance of France.
An important development came as a political instability in France heralded the crumbling of the French Fourth Republic, many parts due to the Algerian crisis. Charles de Gaulle returned to lead France and organized two referenda for Algerians to decide whether Algeria would remain French. The vote was almost unanimously for independence. Charles de Gaulle declared Algeria an independent country on July 3rd. After independence, the FLN experienced immediate fracture as groups which had previously united for a single objective harbored completely different ideas on the management of a newly independent nation. However, unlike other African nations, Algeria's problems were not ethnic divisions because France had thoroughly expurgated the country's tribal connections. Continuous power struggles led to the rise of Ben Bella, a president with unchecked executive power. Increasingly repressive and dictatorial, the presidency crushed multiple insurgencies throughout Algeria. As more political instability and repeated attempts in Algeria piled up, Islamist fundamentalists began gaining power. Economic stagnation, including rising unemployment, created frustration among Algeria's youth, which the Islamists gladly exploited. Perception of corruption led to the mistrust of the government. Eventually, the Islamist party FIS gained so much power in elections that the government and military refused to hand over the power to them. A civil war broke out, which the government won. However, fighting continues to this day as an Islamic branch announced its union with Al-Qaeda. It now calls itself Al-Qaeda in Islamic Brahad and operates using terror to topple the Algerian government. Colonialism has a negative effect on Algeria. It arrested Algeria's natural economic development and established deep divisions in Algerian society between former educated second-class and less educated third-class citizens, and created a racist society. Ultimately, the Algerian war was successful due to the resilient FLN. In an Algerian Muslim lukewarm attitude towards independence from France, the FLN managed to tap into the nationalistic tendency and pride of Algerian Muslims as a group, with economic toll on France of colonialism.
In addition, the war was characterized by brutal massacres of innocent civilians by both sides. Terrorist attacks against French colons, government officials, and garrisons were employed by the FLN to force France to the negotiation table, whereas atrocious reprisals by French troops within the country embittered the native Algerian population. This later led to a period of frigid relations between Paris and Algiers. Algeria demands a full apology from the French, whereas France is reluctant to address the issues associated with its colonial past. Algeria's post-colonial governments were not successful in part due to the deep divisions created by France, but also in their inability to unite and compromise between divisive ideologies and their inability to check the powers of the ruling elite, allowing them to create dictatorial regimes. For now, Algeria needs to focus on creating an equitable system of education, revive trust in the government, crack down on corruption and election fraud, ensure basic freedoms of expression, and seek better relationships with other nations to attract foreign investment, especially France, in order to rejuvenate its political and economic structure and ready itself for the 21st century opportunity.